Welcome back to this special segment of the Mitchell Report. Everybody knows that I cut my teeth on social media in polling. I was involved in analyzing the polls in 2016. And when everybody saw Trump losing, I saw him winning. And today we have one of the top polling experts out there, Chris Wilson. He's with WPA Intelligence, and he's been doing some really good analysis of the polling that's taking place. And, a lot of people think that Trump is running away with this campaign, and maybe he's not. And let's see what Chris has to say. Chris, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate you having me on.
Fantastic. Well, Chris, tell the audience a little bit about WPA Intelligence. What do you guys do?
Well, we do polling and data analytics, and we started as a polling firm. We have really moved more into data analytics. It's about 80% of what we do now. But what I think makes us unique from many in the political space and many of the polls that they see reported in the media is that all of our polls interview based on analytics, and that is we build turnout models. So in other words, when you see a poll come out from your typical media source, or a university poll,
right?
Most of those that are reported, they call people up and ask them first, are you registered to vote? Well, social desirability bias tells us that almost everyone's going to say yes to that. And then they ask them if they're likely to vote. And again, social desirability bias even takes it up a couple notches there. And so what you see is most polls really are only reflective of about half their sample being true voters, particularly when you get into primaries. Whereas ours, we score the file utilizing a predictive model that is a very complex algorithm that I started building out back in 2015 to predict turnout in the presidential race then when I was director of polling analytics on the Cruz for President campaign. Right. And so, Bill, just to kind of do a victory lap on it, when you saw the Iowa Des Moines Register Jan Seltzer poll come out that had Donald Trump in first place and Marco Rubio in second and Ted Cruz in third, our internal polling had us winning. And it's because our polling was based on utilizing those analytical models that built out a prediction as to who would win. And so that was in state after state, we saw media polls getting it wrong and ours getting it right. And I took a lot of pride in that. And we've only improved that model since then. So when you see a survey released by us, you know that that's the interviewing technique that goes in behind it. And so if your listeners or any of them are still awake after me describing all that, I'm happy to talk about how that's different than what they may see reported in the news right now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, one of the things that's very deceptive about national polling in a primary is that primaries are not a national election. They are state elections. And what really matters is those first few states, the battleground states. And when you're doing a national poll and you only have about 500 or 600 people in your sample, you're talking about maybe 10 people per state, and you don't know which states they're focusing on. You don't know where it's coming in. You don't know if those are urban dwellers, or are they women, or who are they? And because you get such a poor response to polling now, you really don't have a random sample anymore, because people, as a result of caller ID and that sort of thing, are not answering that phone at dinner time from an unknown number. And so you have a lot of reweighting and so on and so forth. And I believe this is why, just from a layman's perspective, that we're getting these polls that are so wildly different, where Wall Street Journal comes out and says, oh, Trump's 15 points ahead. And then Morning Consult comes out and says, well, he's 45 points ahead. I'm like, I can't keep track of what's going on here. How are we, as regular folks, supposed to interpret that? Should we just be ignoring these polls right now this early in the process, or should we, what are we trying to read here?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think there are two things that I would suggest to your listeners and viewers in terms of how they would look at polling. One is trends. And so if you mentioned a Wall Street Journal poll that maybe had Donald Trump leading Ron DeSantis by 25 points a few weeks ago, and now only has him leading by 15 points. Right. Well, that is, at least that their sampling methodology is consistent. And so you can derive from that. The trend is that Trump had a lead coming after his indictment. Almost every poll showed that. And that lead has, for the most part, dissipated to where it's a very close race again. Right. The second thing I would take from what your question I would offer up to your listeners is, it's really from a national perspective, you're right. The primary will be decided in Iowa, and then New Hampshire, and then South Carolina, and then Nevada, and then we'll go into Super Tuesday. But the overall Trump versus Biden numbers compared to the Trump or the DeSantis versus Biden numbers, to me, are probably what is most indicative of what will happen in 2024 at this point. And that is, if you look in survey after survey. In fact, you and I connected after I put out a tweet storm about it yesterday. If you average all the surveys together, Trump loses to Biden by anywhere, well, the average is about 2.5 points, whereas DeSantis beats Biden by 3 to 5 points, an average of 3.5 points if you
Right.
weight it down. And so to me, that's really what's important. And that's been consistently the case across the board is that if Republicans want to win in 2024, then Ron DeSantis is the best option as a nominee because Donald Trump will, by all indications, lose to Joe Biden again. And really, the challenge is if you ask people, and we've done this in surveys, we'll take Biden voters from 2020, and ask them if they would switch and vote for Donald Trump today to a person they will not. And so you've really got an electorate that is kind of baked in, if you
Right.
will, to
Right.
use a cooking term between the
Yeah.
two candidates. So you'll end up with almost the exact same results, and maybe even worse. We did electoral college turnout numbers where we showed that Biden would actually win by more because Trump now loses more states than he did in 2020. There are
Right.
states that he was winning before they no longer wins, and so it would be a landslide at the of the Obama Mitt Romney proportion, and that would be
Right.
catastrophic to Republicans up and down the ballot. And so
Yes.
it really is incumbent upon Republicans to take a hard look at the nomination process because the worst thing in the world that could happen, in my view, is to see Joe Biden reelected with majorities and large majorities in both the House and the Senate.
Yeah, absolutely true. And this is one of the things, people say, well, why is the establishment, not like Donald Trump? Is it because, they're globalists and so on and so forth? Well, to a certain extent, yes, that's probably true. However, one of the big reasons I don't like him is what you just mentioned is the down ballot effect. They're concerned not only about losing the White House, but losing our firewall in the House and the Senate, because if they get a majority in the Senate and they get a majority in the House and they get Biden back in the White House, forget about it.
That's right.
I mean, worst case scenario, they're going to be, institutionalizing all that cheating they did before with the ballot drops and the ballot stuffing and all that stuff. They're going to be institutionalizing that into law because they'll have those advantages. One of the things that I've talked about in my social media feed, and I've gotten a lot of kickback because I was really a super duper number one Trump guy, and I've shifted to DeSantis. And of course, people are going to be unhappy about that. But, the MAGA base says, well, Trump's going to win because we all still believe in him. I'm like, yeah, but the MAGA base is probably only about half of the GOP. Right now in the House, the MAGA base is only about a quarter of the House, the GOP House. So the MAGA base is about half of the GOP, and the GOP is only about a third of the country. So if you do the simple math there, that's about 1/6 of the electorate. This is the MAGA base. So you need to win the moderate voters. You need to win the independents if you're going to win the White House. And my read right now is Trump is not doing well with the independent voters. He's not doing well with the evangelicals. He's not doing well with suburban women. Am I right about that?
No, you're right with all that, and he's not doing well with college-educated voters. So you take those two together, and the one place I would disagree is I think really the Trump base, I'll call it that, because I think MAGA is become an ideology, and it's not about one
Right.
person.
Right.
But the
Right.
Trump base within the Republican primary is about a third. You have a third of the electorate.
So
in
it's even
Republican.
less.
Yeah, it is. That will stay with him no matter what. So that means
Right.
2/3 are considering other candidates. And right now, Ron DeSantis, as you have stated, does very well with those universes. But your point about moderates is really a fascinating one from an academic perspective. And again, I fear I'll chase your viewers away with this, but I could cite 3 studies: Ballard in 2020, Jacobson in 23, and Crispin et al. From that has just been published in 2020 in 2023. That all did studies that show the effect that Donald Trump has on the Republican primary electorate, on Republicans in a general election, and then then with moderates and independents. And you can calculate out about a 7 points that Donald Trump cost Republicans with moderates and independents. So let's walk through races just in 2022, Bill, in which that cost people the election. Well, that means it probably cost Adam Laxalt his election in Nevada. It cost Dr. Oz his election in Pennsylvania. It cost Herschel Walker his election in Georgia. And it cost Blake Masters his election in Arizona. So that's 4 Senate seats. In fact, that Ballard study I mentioned did an analysis looking at 2018, and it calculates that Trump's endorsement or Trump campaigning cost Republicans 15 seats overall. So that means he cost in the House and cost in the Senate. So if you look at where Republicans would be today if Donald Trump was not on the ballot, sorry, the lights go off here. I'm going to wave and get them back on.
That's okay. No
There we
worries. There
go.
we go.
So I have to do it like 5 or 6 times a day.
Modern technology.
So
It's okay.
I
It's okay.
clearly don't move around enough. I need to get up and walk around a bit more.
Yeah.
But if you look at overall the electorate and the makeup of the House and Senate, and if that happens and he is the nominee in 2024, you're going to see Democrats not just doing what you did in terms of voter laws, but also packing the Supreme Court, taking away the filibuster. I mean, the fact is that we will live in a completely different America in 2025 and 2026 if Donald Trump is Republican nominee. So this is even those that you define as MAGA supporters, if they really want to see an agenda that is building the wall, being tough with China, being tough with Russia. Well, that's I guess the opposite, but standing up to our foreign adversaries, being tough on trade. Well, you're going to cost yourself those goals if Donald Trump is the Republican nominee.
Yeah. Now, what do you think of Trump's read the other day? This, to me, this was like the king of all unforced errors, where he came out and said, "Well, the RNC arranged these debates. They didn't call and ask me. Ronna McDaniel, who I just got reelected, basically, didn't bother to pick up the phone and say, by the way, we're going to have some debates. Oh, debates? Whoever thought of those, right? We're going to have some debates, and Fox News is going to do the first one." And Trump was like, "Well, gee whiz, they might ask me some tough questions. I don't think I should debate. I'm so far ahead. It's impossible. Just go ahead and coronate me now, And I saw that and I said to myself, there only is one serious competitor in this race. It's Ron DeSantis. All the others, they're just getting book deals and they're just raising money for the future and so on and so forth. They're getting some notoriety, maybe a few minutes on the debate stage, but Ron DeSantis is the only serious candidate. And until he announces, Donald Trump is the only guy on the dance floor.
Yeah.
So what do you think is going to happen? I think that DeSantis, my guess is sometime after the 5th. Isn't that when the legislature wraps at the 5th of May?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, early May.
Sometime after the 5th. And I think that they're trying to pass that thing that, where he doesn't have to resign to run or anything like that. So sometime after the 5th, he'll be announcing, hopefully, I hope. And do you think, in your opinion, the polls will start to shift once that happens and becomes a real candidate?
Well, I don't think there's any question that's going to happen. I mean, there have been studies that show that it is difficult to measure a candidate's strength whenever that person is not a candidate.
Right.
So I believe once DeSantis gets in, you're going to start to see assuming he does get in, you're going to start to see this race close very closely. And it's going to look, you can really look at what happened after November to get a feel for what will happen whenever DeSantis is in the race. Because when he received the most attention, the most press coverage was right after he was reelected in Florida by historical margins.
Right.
But your first point of your question, Bill, I don't know if you can remember. You remember the last time Donald Trump skipped a debate, but it was the Saturday before the Iowa caucus. He believed he had the race in the bag. He didn't need to participate. Right. So he did not show up at the debate the Saturday before the Iowa caucus. I remember sitting in my hotel room in Des Moines watching the debate. I didn't go over for it because I wanted to watch a basketball game that was on at the same time. I had both TVs going, basketball and debate. But it was, and then he ended up losing. And so he said right after that, well, I won't skip any more debates. So I think he's forgotten a lot of the lessons he learned in 2016. Voters in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and even Super Tuesday states, they expect candidates to earn their vote. And you don't do that by staying home when there's a debate called.
Yeah, and here's the message that I think the Trump camp didn't think through on this. Is that Trump is presenting himself as, I'm the only guy that can stand up to the deep state. I'm the only guy that can beat the Democrats. I'm your fighter. I'm your warrior. I'm your retribution. And then when he hears about a debate on Fox News that he wasn't checked out and there's a possibility they might be mean to him, he's like, well, I'm not going to do that. And it's like, wait a minute. I thought you're our warrior. I thought you're our WWE, go into the ring, tear their heads off guy, and now you're afraid to even debate a couple other Republicans. It's a contradiction in messaging that I don't think they really thought through. I've often said that Trump does his worst posts at 2:00 in the morning. They really need to take his phone away from him, lock it in the safe at midnight. Because some of these crazy things come out at that time. One of the things that I want to talk to you about that I'm concerned. This is a real concern that nobody's talking about. Is the whole idea of open primaries. Because we have a lot of open primaries. We have partially open primaries, fully open primaries. And some of these are in very important states. And what an open primary means is that you can vote in the other guy's primary. Well, if Joe Biden is the de facto nominee, and nobody's really going to give him a serious run for the money, okay, it's not going to be like, Hillary versus or something like that, or Bernie. It's going to be, pretty much a de facto win for him. They're not going to be motivated to vote in that Democrat primary. They're going to be motivated to organize a crossover and vote in the Republican primary and vote for the weakest possible candidate, which in my opinion based on what we said, would be Donald Trump in this case. Is this a problem, and how can we avoid this?
You know, it's funny if you think back. There have been so many efforts by the other party to do that. You know, Rush Limbaugh had his pro vote Hillary
Right.
effort down
Right.
in Texas, and
Right.
it comes up every year. And you're right. There's not. For anybody who hasn't been paying attention on the Democratic side, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is running against Biden, and I don't see that as a Kennedy Carter 1980 type of primary.
Right.
But who knows? I mean, let's face it. There was also an NBC poll that came out this weekend that showed only a third of Biden voters wanting him to even run again. So I do think you could see a little bit of momentum grow behind him. But you're right. It's probably not all that it doesn't have a snowball effect. So to your specific question. Looking at states where that can occur. I mean, that's New Hampshire is one of them where they allow independents to vote. But there's also a lot of states that don't even have party registration. Bill, you got Missouri, Texas, multiple others that are big states, important states in which a voter can show up and just vote wherever they want to.
Right.
So I would say this to those of us who work in politics. And it's kind of like if you play a sport. I mean, I was playing basketball whenever they put in the 3-point line. That's how old I am. And our coach didn't say, well, that's unfair, and we're going to only shoot 2-pointers. We learned how to shoot a 3-pointer. And so I think it's incumbent upon those of us who work in politics to make sure that we know the rules and that we take advantage of those rules and that we are communicating in such a way that allows, because you're going to have to win those voters in a general election anyway. And if hardcore Democrats are going to show up and vote in the Republican primary, well, then clearly they have way too much time on their hands and not enough and they need to get lives. But it'll be, if we can't overcome that as those of us who work in politics and run campaigns, well, then something's wrong with us and we're not able to be successful based on the strength of our ideas. And so let me bring it back to the Ron DeSantis effort. If you look at what he was able to do in Florida, Ron DeSantis won the city of Miami. He won Broward County. He won this county where Disney is. I mean, Ron DeSantis ran up the score in a way no candidate, and certainly no Republican candidate, had done in Florida history. And so I do think it is important for those of us who observe politics and work in politics to recognize that when you have a candidate that exhibits that type of strength and can bring over Democrats, and can actually not just bring them over, but the party registration numbers in Florida have switched from majority Democrat to strong majority Republican. When you look at someone who has that level of attraction, that is that transformational, well, maybe it's time to say, hey, look, maybe this guy would make a good nominee for a party that has kind of lost a lot of elections lately, and a lot of elections, frankly, that we should have won.
Yeah, well, tell me if my numbers are wrong, but I believe that DeSantis won Miami-Dade by 13 points, and Trump had lost Miami-Dade by 7 points. That's a 20-point shift to the right. So DeSantis, people say, oh, he's new. DeSantis knows how to win elections. DeSantis is 5-0. Okay, right. I believe he won 3 House races. He won the first governor's race. Now, he won the first governor's race. He was relatively unknown on the national or the big level like that. And he did get Trump's endorsement in the primary, and he barely squeaked by against a terrible candidate with about a half a percentage point. But in 2022, he came back, and, Trump kind of gave him a little one-sentence endorsement at that final rally, in Florida, because Trump didn't want to call him names at that, but he had just been calling him names the week before. So this wasn't a big endorsement from Trump in 2022. And DeSantis was basically running on his own record. So with Trump's endorsement, DeSantis got a half-point victory. With his own record, he got a 20-point victory. The guy knows how to win. He knows how to appeal across the aisle. And he gets things done. He's a very pragmatic, gets things done guy. He plays long ball. He's strategic. He's not reactionary like Trump. You don't have the big ego problems. He's not out there alienating people like Trump does. So I think that he can do very, very well. And once he gets announced and he's going to flex those big muscles, he's got a lot of money in the bank. He's going to flex those big muscles, put some advertising out there, put some billboards out there, get the earned media on the news shows. I think he's really going to surge against Trump.
Yeah, it's, if you look at his overall record, it is impressive, and what he's been able to accomplish in Florida. He has been a leader nationally in terms of taking on the transgender ideology and CRT in schools and so many different other aspects are important to conservatives right now. But if you read his book, and it was a New York Times bestseller, it actually outsold the Obama book early on, and it may still be. I haven't really been paying attention over the last few weeks. It is, I read it when it first came out, Bill, and I didn't know that he had played in the Little League World Series. I didn't know that he went to Yale on a baseball scholarship. I didn't know that he left Harvard Law School, where most people leave and go make millions of dollars a year, and joined the Navy, and then went over and advised SEAL Team 1 in Iraq. This man has an amazing record, and it is really impressive what he's accomplished. And it is a situation where I really feel like his communication style is probably the closest thing that we've had in Republican politics since Ronald Reagan, because he is strong, like Reagan was, but he also appeals to people across the aisle. He has a way of communicating in which is that he can bring in Democrats and moderates and to explain conservative ideas in a way that doesn't chase those who have voted Republican in the past out of the party. And I got to tell you, as someone who believes in the Republican Party and is a movement conservative, that is important to me, that we have someone who is able to explain our idealism, our ideology, and make people help voters understand why that is the best choice for their lives. And that has certainly been what he's been able to accomplish in Florida. And I think I'm excited to see what he's able to do on a national scale.
Yeah, it is exciting. Okay. This will be our final topic of the day. Trump benefits from a big field, right? Because he gets to split the non-Trump vote. I think that a lot of these candidates that are running just to get their book deals and their raise money and that sort of thing. And I think that by South Carolina, we may be down to a two-man race. What's your take on that? Because, nobody wants to be humiliated and keep getting 2 or 3% in these primaries because it's bad for the future. So do you think that once we get to South Carolina, this could be a narrow field, maybe just the two candidates, Trump and DeSantis?
It worked for Ted Cruz, but there's 16 candidates in that race. And
right.
When we started, we were a little bit behind Jim Gilmore in the polls, I think, but we were able to finish second overall. And sadly, we just could not get John Kasich to drop out. And so we never ever had a two-man race. But
right.
This is a different situation. You don't have a John Kasich kind of ride or die type of situation. You could have Liz Cheney get in, but I think that just would be, like you said, looking for a book deal. So right now, Mike Pompeo's already announced he's not running. Mike Pence has not announced whether he's running or not. I think ultimately he probably decides not to. I don't have any inside information there, but I know what his numbers are nationally, and it's not a good time for him, a good situation
right.
against President Trump in the race. So you really have Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, who is very impressive, but I think it's really difficult to go from not just from being a businessman to being president. I mean, it's only happened once.
He'd be a great cabinet member. He
would. You're right. I mean, the man is just absolutely brilliant, and I love watching him debate liberals because he just wipes the floor with them. So going to your point, I think you probably have a situation where Tim Scott and Nikki Haley probably try and hang on to South Carolina, just thinking that it's like a lifeline type situation.
Right.
But I don't think you have them both. You don't have them both in, and so my prediction, if I made one today, is that I think assuming DeSantis gets in, I think he wins in Iowa. I think New Hampshire is a jump ball just because of the open primary situation you discussed, and then I think you have DeSantis go on a winning streak in South Carolina and probably close it up by Super Tuesday.
Yeah, boy, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be exciting? I can't wait. I tell you what. I took a big risk with my career by going all in on DeSantis, but, sometimes you just got to do what you think is the right thing to do. Yeah, and, right. I was fine with sort of, going with both candidates, Trump, DeSantis. Yeah, maybe they'll get together. Maybe they won't. Who knows, But when Trump started coming out and calling DeSantis a globalist and a rhino, I'm just like, okay, I can't lend my brand to this anymore. That's just simply not true,
That's right.
And so that's why I made the announcement, and a lot of papers wrote stories about it. So Bill Mitchell leaves Trump, But I made the big announcement about it because I'm just like, guys, I can't back this up. I got to go all in on DeSantis. My gut tells me that he is the best solution for America. And people say, well, he's being disloyal to President Trump, and I'm like, his loyalty is not to President Trump. His loyalty is to America. And if he feels like he would be a better president than President Trump, he owes it to America to run out of loyalty to America. Do you agree?
Well said. Yeah, I can. Yes, I agree, and that's probably the best I've heard it put. So I may steal that, Bill. I'll give you credit.
You can use that. No royalties on that. You can use that. Yeah. Okay, folks, this has been Chris Wilson. He is the CEO of WPA Intelligence. Obviously, brilliant guy in the world of polling, and he has optimistic feelings about the DeSantis campaign. He is concerned that if Trump is the nominee, that statistically speaking, just the math, just the numbers, it's not there. It's not there. And that Biden could win a record number of electoral votes, similar to an Obama election. And that not only that, and even a bigger disaster, we could be looking at a down ballot wipeout. And folks, if we get Biden again, if we get a Democrat House, a Democrat Senate, forget about it. America will never be the same. Chris, I'll give you the final word.
It's tough to top that up, but I do agree with that. If Donald Trump is the nominee, we get wiped out in the House and Senate. And you're right. There's no plan B on our country. There's no freedom lives here, and we need to protect it.
Right, absolutely. Chris, thank you so much for coming on.
You bet. Thank you.
Folks, we'll see you again soon.